Hey, what is going on, guys? This is SMEB Reviews, and today we're taking a look at the newest album from 21 Pilots titled Trench. Let's get to it. 21 Pilots broke big with their album Vessels, which was after they had signed to Fueled by Ramen. And obviously, Blurry Face was a complete pop juggernaut, and it was hard to avoid a lot of those singles. So I've had quite a bit of exposure to them. I've listened to most of their discography, and honestly, I just can't get into it, and I know a lot of people definitely disagree with that, but honestly, I just don't feel like they've ever had a really cohesive work. They've all been rather inconsistent, and Tyler Joseph is a frontman. While he has the right persona for it, his voice really just doesn't match, and it just doesn't really work for me. I don't really enjoy his voice at all. So, I obviously was pretty apprehensive about this review, knowing that a lot of people will probably not like my opinions on a new 21 Pilots record. But then we got Trench, the whole album. Honestly, with the singles, I was still feeling that way, but the whole album kind of changed my tune. No, it's not perfect, and we'll get into that, but honestly, it is a very different approach for them and very ambitious of a release. One that honestly, it's amazing that Fueled by Ramen let them put out, because it is very different and it takes shots at a lot of things and really creates a bunch of different sounds for them that really is not what Fueled by Ramen is normally about. So, it's a very surprising and ambitious release, and one that I'm okay with. As I said, there's a lot of different sounds here. They typically stayed more in the lane of the pop, hip-hop realm, but we do start getting a little more indie approach with this album, as well as some more funk sounds. It is very diverse and has quite a lot of different genre-bending songs that are fairly interesting and provide a lot of interesting dynamic throughout the album. Now, there is a large concept, and one that is very difficult to completely get into just because it is so cryptic, and a point that I will touch on later. But for the most part, the concept is that the narrator, they have helped create this world of Dima and the bishops, and so we have him trying to go through the struggle of being a part of this world and accepting it, and now starting to see its flaws and wanting to escape from it. One that as I said, we see that he probably built himself, or helped build at least, and so it's a very interesting concept. One that can discuss topics such as religion, as well as their own fame. Again, another topic we'll discuss in a little bit. But one that I did really like as an overall concept. And I did mention that this album does seem kind of strange for Fueled by Ramen to allow to be let out, and for 21 Pilots to really want to put out, because it does kind of take shots at their fan base. It takes shots because it's easy to draw a parallel between the metaphor of Dima and him wanting to escape this thing that he created with his fame and the immense fan base that 21 Pilots has established. It can be kind of a shot to the very overwhelming fan base that 21 Pilots can have. And it is an interesting comparison to make, one that is rather surprising to hear from the band, but one that is definitely took some guts to put out, and one that I can appreciate as someone who is more of an outsider looking in. And this was a departure from the regular sound, but I do really enjoy it. There is so much interesting music here that really creates something that's worth listening to. The past albums I've never really got into. They seemed a little too pop-leaning, and not to say that pop-leaning is bad, but they were way too simple and uninteresting music. On top of that, as I said, Tyler Joseph just didn't really have the voice for it, but here we actually get some pretty good vocal melodies from him, and honestly, in this album, he sounds much better than he did. As many people have pointed out, his rapping does seem to have improved on this album, as well as just simply his vocal style. It seems a little more trained than it was during Blurry Face or Vessel or self-titled. It does seem better. It truly has improved, in my opinion. And with these different styles, we get a lot of diverse sounds that really do make it an intriguing listen. Now, the biggest problem here comes that they were trying to go for a concept album. If this album had not been a concept album, man, honestly, this album could have been so much better. But they're trying to go for a concept here, and it's so incredibly loose. Some of the songs are so directly about this concept. Songs like Nico and the Niners that specifically are talking about the dynamic between these characters that are involved in Dima and the bishops and everything involved. But some of the songs just really don't have any real play. Yes, they're a loose concept, whereas you could see how it could apply to the emotions that the characters might be feeling, but they don't specifically reference the concept at all. And while that's not necessarily a detriment, it really just creates such a loose concept that it can really take away from the punch of this, as I said, intriguing concept. It's one that I would have loved to have explored, and it wasn't fully explored. Furthermore, the tone of this album is completely wrong. Honestly, most of these songs come across as rather upbeat and joyful, as this album touches on some pretty dark subjects, and it just really messes with the concept. As I said, if this album had been an album purely of just music, no real overarching concept, it would have been much better, honestly. Or if they had been able to focus that concept, it could have been much better. But really, we just see a weakness in their songwriting by them not being able to really focus on the concept. Yes, that doesn't make the songs that don't necessarily focus on the concept good. Legend is an excellent example. It kind of breaks the narrative, as it's Joseph specifically speaking about his own grandfather, which has nothing to do with the whole concept of the bishops and Dima. But honestly, it's still a good song, and I do really enjoy it. So the problem comes that it just breaks up the flow of the album and really just makes for a confusing listen. There were two options they could have taken, and unfortunately they fell right in the middle with this album. But honestly, it's still a good album. I do really enjoy it. Songs like Neon Gravestones are incredible. It talks about how we glorify suicide, and honestly allows the narrator, Joseph, to specifically talk about his own struggles and really talk them through with himself in a music format. And it really does provide a very powerful punch and a really interesting take on modern culture. One of the best songs on this album completely. I love that track, and there are so many other standout tracks on here. Again, Legends, that's honestly a really good song. While it does break the narrative of the album, it has a really good melody and is very easy to get stuck in your head. Plus, it's just a fun song that takes a little different approach than their typical style. Nico and the Niners honestly comes out as one of the weakest tracks on the albums. It is one where we get a very nasally delivery from Tyler Joseph, one that honestly becomes obnoxious at times, as well as it just doesn't really do anything. You think that it's one that could really grow and create some kind of punch, but it kind of just stays a very middle of the road to very, very quiet song, and it just really does not work, despite it being one of the few that really sticks strongly to the concept of this album. But honestly, the problem in this album does not fall to each specific song. It falls as a broad paintbrush stroke across the whole album, which is the broken concept and tone. It does completely draw a detriment to this album. Still a good album, but it's not an individual song that really stands out as a truly bad moment. While Nico and the Niners is not necessarily my favorite track, it's still not terrible. The rest of the tracks are honestly pretty good, and I do really enjoy them. It's just that the overall concept is so loose and unfocused that it really does draw a detriment to this album, especially when the complete story is broken and taken out of character with specific songs. It's a fine album, and I do really enjoy it, and it's a complete step up for 21 Pilots, in my opinion. I love what they did tonally with this album, and they created so many different sounds, and honestly, I think that this album would be very, very close to perfect if it was not for these broken concepts and poor tone shifts all throughout the album. If it wasn't for that, it would have gotten a much higher score, but because of it, I can only give it a 7 out of 10. Thank you guys so much for watching. What did you guys think of this album? Please let me know down below. Also, is there anything coming out that you'd like me to check out, or anything I can do to improve the quality of my videos? Besides that, thank you guys so much. I was very highly nervous about this review only because I do know 21 Pilots fans are very, very passionate, and I respect this band. I do think that they do an excellent job on this album. It just wasn't quite focused enough. They didn't have enough experience with the true concept album to really make it work. One, that concept albums can be pretty tricky to delve into. So, what did you guys think? Besides that, thank you guys so incredibly much for watching this video, and I'll see you guys later.